You're watching Reality Check. As the war worsens in Ukraine, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has stepped up his demand that Western nations should enforce a no-fly zone. Tonight, we decode why this is an unrealistic, perhaps even catastrophic demand. To be clear, the Russian invasion has got bloodier in the past 48 hours. Explosions reported in key cities of Kiev and Kharkiv in the east. A TV tower blown up in Kiev in which 5 are reported to be killed. Reports of Russian troops paradropping into Kharkiv, which has come under heavy shelling. A massive Russian military convoy inches ever closer to Kiev. All of these terrifying images and this escalation of violence is one of the reasons why Ukraine's president, in his latest appeal, said he cannot fight Russia alone.
Говорили багато разів з президентом Байденом. Я вдячний йому за ці і можливості, і допомогу. Вони також мене не чули. Я їм говорив, що Україна буде боротися, ви побачите, міцніше за всіх. Але одні ми на самоті з Росією ми просто не зможемо. Ми про діалог. Я вважаю, так, треба припинити хоча б бомбардування людей. Просто бомбардування припинити і після цього сісти за стіл перемовин.
Cannot fly Russia alone, he says. Essentially, a no-fly zone of the kind being sought means deploying NATO aircraft to Ukrainian airspace in order to block Russia from using its air force in support of the invasion. But as many experts have pointed out, this means NATO jets will have to shoot down Russian planes. In effect, an American/NATO declaration of war on Russia, war between two superpowers that put together control 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. In other words, enforcing a no-fly zone could trigger World War III. Now, it's not as if no-fly zones haven't been used in the past by the US and its allies. The BBC, for instance, cited 3 instances of that. Iraq, 1991, after the first Gulf War. Bosnia, 1992, during the Balkans conflict. Libya, 2011, as part of that military intervention. But in each of those cases, the US and its partners were facing vastly inferior military forces. Not so with Russia, which is a global military superpower armed to the teeth with nuclear weaponry. All the more risky after Putin announced that he had put Russia's nuclear forces on special alert. In fact, just today, Russia's foreign minister was quoted as saying a third world war will involve nuclear weapons. Now, governments in America and the United Kingdom are aware of this, which is why they repeatedly turned down the idea of a no-fly zone. Listen to what US President Joe Biden had to say recently.
But let me be clear. Our forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies in the event that Putin decides to keep moving west. And as I've made crystal clear, the United States and our allies will defend every inch of territory that is NATO territory with the full force of our collective power. Every single inch. I'll be honest with you, as I always promised I would be. A Russian dictator invading a foreign country has cost around the world.
Will defend every inch of NATO territory. Remember, Ukraine is not NATO. Boris Johnson in a press conference said, when it comes to a no-fly zone, we have to accept that it involves shooting down Russian planes, and it's simply not on the agenda of any NATO country. So what are the alternatives? Well, the alternatives to no-fly zones is to pump funds, weaponry to the Ukrainian army and escalate sanctions against Russia. And while that may slow down the Russian advance, most experts agree it may be unlikely to end the invasion, which is why Ukrainians are increasingly having to take matters in their own hands, as seen in this video, where hundreds of citizens can be seen blocking Russian access to one of Ukraine's key power stations by literally crowding themselves onto the roads and the highways. And also motivational videos like this one by the Ukraine government emphasizing that the National Guards, together with Ukrainian citizens, will defend their land. Now, does all of this mean that the world will have to remain effectively a spectator to an increasingly bloody Russian invasion against its much smaller neighbor? For now, the difficult but inevitable answer seems to be yes.